Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, Pyongyang agrees to resume reunions of the families separated by the Korean War, but wants to restart a suspended inter-Korean tourism project as well. Seoul draws the line, saying the two issues are separate. Amid growing hopes for thawing relations on the Korean peninsula, South Korea and the US kick off their 12-day annual military drills on this Monday. Unlike previous years, North Korea has refrained from making bellicose threats. Plus, after the deaths of more than 800 people in the Egyptian military's crackdown on protests, the country's army chief says there's room for everyone to participate in restoring democracy, but adds the military will not tolerate violence. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Where's the best place for bibimbap?
Les Jeux Olympiques d'hiver se dérouleront-ils à Pyeongchang?
هل أنتم حقاً سابع أكبر مصدر في العالم؟
この歌手は誰ですか？你好，最近哪部电视剧的人气最旺？
Korea is attracting interest from around the world. The more you know, the more you want to know. Dynamic Korea.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Choi Yu-sun here in Seoul.
Good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start this lunchtime with developments over the weekend on the inter-Korean front. North Korea agreed at the weekend to the South's proposal to discuss resuming reunions for families separated since the Korean War.
With hopes to also resolve the suspended Mount Kumgang tourism project, Pyongyang counter-proposed the venue for the talks, to which Seoul later drew the line and said the two issues will be handled separately. Our Hwang Sung-hee has our top story.
Just hours after North Korea accepted South Korea's offer for talks on family reunions, Seoul's unification ministry welcomed the news, but reiterated that the meeting should take place at the truce village of Panmunjom.
We once again propose that the Red Cross working level talks take place at the South Korean side of Panmunjom as earlier proposed.
The ministry explained that Panmunjom is an ideal venue for the talks because of the convenience of its location. Through its state-run Korean Central News Agency, the North earlier agreed to meet on Friday to discuss issues on resuming reunions for families separated during the Korean War, but suggested that the talks be held at the scenic Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea.
The inter-Korean Red Cross working level talks will take place on August 23rd, as suggested by the South, but the venue will be changed to Mount Kumgang, so the two sides can tour the site of the reunion and discuss future plans.
North Korea also proposed to hold separate talks on Thursday on reopening the Mount Kumgang Resort to South Korean tourists, offering to discuss Seoul's concerns like ensuring personal safety and protecting South Korean properties. The resort remains closed to South Koreans since 2008, after a tourist from the South was fatally shot by a North Korean guard. The North claimed that the resumption of the tours to Mount Kumgang, following the normalization of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, will bring bigger joy to all Koreans, but Seoul said it needs more time to review Pyongyang's proposal. Meanwhile, a South Korean communications and power inspection team will make its second trip to Kaesong on Monday for a check on the facilities at the joint business park. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
While the two Koreas are making efforts to revive dialogue, South Korea and the U.S. have started their joint training exercise, the Ulji Freedom Guardian. But unlike in the past, Pyongyang has so far refrained from strongly protesting the drills. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea and the U.S. have kicked off on Monday their annual 12-day joint training exercise. The computer simulation-aided Joint Ulji Freedom Guardian drill mobilizes roughly 50,000 Koreans and 30,000 U.S. troops. The main purpose of the exercise is to maintain security on the Korean peninsula, while upholding joint defense capabilities between the two allies. In this year's exercise, observers from the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission, which ensures the implementation of the Korean War Armistice Agreement, along with 7 countries in the United Nations Command, will monitor the drills. Along with this military exercise, Seoul has launched its annual 4-day local emergency drill to measure the government's readiness for dealing with terror situations and military threats from the north. Unlike other years in which North Korea has lashed out against the joint exercises, North Korea has so far kept mum on the issue, with experts saying it is due to recent progress on the inter-Korean relations. Pyongyang had conventionally condemned the joint training drills, claiming they are a prelude to war, disregarding Seoul and Washington's argument that they are for defense purposes only. The two Koreas remain technically at war after the Korean War ended with the armistice agreement. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye has emphasized the importance of maintaining a firm national security posture at all times, saying a crisis always comes at a peaceful moment when a country forgets about war. At a special cabinet meeting on the first day of the annual Ulji Freedom Guardian exercise, President Park said preparing for a national emergency situation is indispensable in securing the country and the people's safety. She ordered all government offices to actively participate in this year's drills to train the country to prepare for a real-life situation. The special cabinet meeting follows the first National Security Council meeting convened under the Park Geun-hye administration.
South Korea's Defense Acquisition Agency will announce the winner of its $7.4 billion contract to buy 60 advanced fighter jets next month. But it looks like Boeing, with its F-15 Silent Eagle, has been chosen as the supplier. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration said Sunday that one of the 2 finalists has been disqualified after abruptly changing its contractual terms. This bidder was later known to be the European Aeronautic Defence and Space Company with its Eurofighter Tranche 3 Typhoon. The multi-billion-dollar competition was narrowed to a 2-race between Boeing and EADS last week because the 2 firms offered their jets for prices within Korea's budget. A 3-member UN panel will officially begin its investigation into North Korea's human rights abuses today. Members of the Commission of Inquiry, who arrived in Seoul over the weekend, will meet with South Korean officials as well as a number of leading human rights activists on Monday. Starting Tuesday, the group will hold hearings for 5 days at Yonsei University, where some 30 witnesses are expected to testify about the North's human rights violations, including torture and arbitrary detention. The panel's findings will be presented at the UN General Assembly in New York in October. A final report will be submitted to the UN Human Rights Council next March.
Former and incumbent National Intelligence Service agents and police officers are taking to the witness stand at the National Assembly today as part of an ongoing parliamentary probe into allegations the intelligence agency meddled in last year's presidential election. The female NIS agent who was found to have posted negative online comments about opposition presidential candidates before the December 19th election is also in the hot seat. She is believed to have received orders from former NIS Director Won Se-hoon, who is facing legal proceedings on the matter. As the hearing involves active NIS agents, a giant screen wall has been set up so they don't expose their faces. The hearing got off to a bumpy start, however, as some lawmakers demanded the screen be taken down. We'll bring you updates in our next newscast. The Korean government has unveiled plans to tighten regulations on the use of offshore bank accounts as a means to root out shady deals used for tax evasion. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance said Monday that Koreans with financial accounts abroad worth more than 1 billion won, or roughly $900,000 will be obligated to report their overseas assets starting next year. Those violating the new rules will be hit with a fine of 10% of the total assets in their overseas accounts. The plan is in line with President Park Geun-hye's pledge to uncover loopholes in the underground economy to raise tax revenue for boosting welfare. Korea has no immediate plans to ban imports of fishery products from Japan in the face of mounting concerns about radioactive contamination from its nuclear disaster, as the radiation levels are below safety limits. But the debate continues on whether it is safe to consume the goods. Our Son Jang-in reports.
Korean consumers remain concerned about the growing rumors that fishery products imported from Japan are dangerous to eat. According to data, 159 tons of Japanese fishing goods were brought into Korea in 2011 when a 9.0 magnitude earthquake and tsunami devastated the Fukushima region in Japan. And last year alone, a total of more than 2,700 tons of products were imported by Korea. From these Japanese goods, radioactive cesium was detected at a level of 1 becquerel to as high as 98 becquerels per kilogram. The government has allowed the products into the country, as the figure still stands below the country's limit of 100 becquerels. Japanese farm products and processed foods, on the other hand, go through an 8-week-long radioactive check and are returned if even a small amount of harmful material is detected. The government says this double standard is inevitable due to technical issues and the fact that the food storage period is different for each food group. While the government reiterates its stance saying the fishery products are safe to eat, mothers with young children are still not at ease on the issue. Son Jang-in, Arirang News.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
Turning now to the turmoil in Egypt. The country's military has declared that it will not tolerate any further violent protests as security forces continue to arrest hundreds of members of ousted President Mohamed Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood. Our Jim Young-gil reports.
Addressing the current unrest, Egypt Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi went on state TV Sunday to say there was room for people of all political and religious persuasions to live together in Egypt. But he also warned the military would not be silent in the face of violence.
The will of the Egyptian people is free and they can choose whoever they want to rule them. The army and the police right now are the guardians of the will of the people.
Some welcomed the statement, saying violence should not be tolerated within the country.
To be honest, what he is saying is correct. We reject violence whether it's on one side or the other. Egyptians are the ones dying and further bloodshed should be forbidden.
Supporters of deposed President Morsi and those protesting the military coup are faced with growing uncertainty as more leaders of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood are arrested by the day. The army enforced a dawn-to-dusk curfew in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, on Sunday, with soldiers standing by in armored vehicles and manned checkpoints. The military unseated Morsi on July 3rd after millions of Egyptians took to the streets to demand that he step down as he failed to show commitment to democracy. More than 830 people have been killed in Egypt since security forces forcibly broke up 2 pro-Morsi protest camps in Cairo last Wednesday. Jim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And staying with Egypt, the international community has had no choice but to respond to the recent bloodshed in the North African country. While almost all countries are calling for both sides to show cool heads, lawmakers in the US are wrapped up in a heated debate over whether Washington should continue sending hundreds of millions of dollars in military and economic aid to Cairo. Our Park Ji-won has the details.
The turmoil in Egypt prompted Pope Francis to pray for peace during Sunday's Mass held at St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. The European Union also said on Sunday in a joint statement by the presidents of the European Commission and the European Council that the Egyptian military and the interim government should end the violence, or it said it will, quote, urgently review its relations with Egypt. However, some Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia have criticized Western countries for attempting to destabilize Egypt and expressed their support for the Egyptian military. In the U.S., lawmakers continue to debate whether the U.S. should carry on sending hundreds of millions of dollars worth of military and economic aid to Egypt. Out of the $1.5 billion sent to Cairo each year, $1.3 billion goes to the military. Egypt has been a recipient of U.S. bilateral aid since 1979 when it signed a peace treaty with Israel.
Now, with the recent violent crackdown, I do not see how we can continue aid. I believe it must be suspended because, unfortunately, I think the military has gotten the impression that whatever they do, we will continue our aid. So I do support suspending aid at this time.
Other lawmakers say the U.S. should continue its aid to Egypt, considering its long-standing bilateral relations with the North African country and its national security interests in the region.
One of the obvious facts of a transition from an authoritarian government to a democracy, it takes a long time and it's not a straight line. And so we have to have a policy that expresses our outrage, really, at the military, but also gives the president the tools to, we hope, engage them.
U.S. President Obama criticized Egypt's military-backed interim government strongly last week following the military's recent crackdown on pro-Morsi supporters. He also called off a joint military exercise scheduled for later this year, but the White House has yet to announce whether or not it will continue its bilateral aid to Egypt. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Around 20,000 refugees from Syria have arrived in Iraq after fleeing the violence in their country in what is thought to be one of the biggest single waves of refugees since the uprising against President Bashar al-Assad began in March 2011. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees says up to 10,000 refugees crossed into Iraqi Kurdistan on Saturday, bringing the total influx since last Thursday to 20,000. While it's not fully clear what triggered the mass exodus, it comes as fighting between Syrian Kurds and anti-government rebels has intensified. The UN, local authorities and NGOs are reportedly struggling to cope with the wave of people, with many refugees stuck out in the open and without access to basic food and water supplies.
A volcano in southern Japan erupted Sunday, shooting up a giant plume of smoke into the air. Large amounts of volcanic ash fell in the region, causing delays in public transportation and forcing people to take cover. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
An ash cloud loomed over southern Japan after Mount Sakurajima erupted on Sunday afternoon, blasting an ash plume of thousands of meters into the air and casting a dark spell over the region. The 1,117-meter or 3,665 feet volcano near Kagoshima City began to erupt around 4:30 p.m. local time. Volcanic ash swept the northern and central parts of the city, causing a delay in train services and forcing drivers to use their headlights in broad daylight. Residents of Kagoshima and tourists held handkerchiefs to their mouths and wore masks for protection, while others shielded themselves with umbrellas. No injuries or deaths have been reported. The plume of smoke reached a spectacular height of 5,000 meters, the highest record since data was compiled in 1955. The Japanese Meteorological Observatory also reported a pyroclastic flow, a current of gas and rock discovered roughly 1 kilometer southeast down the slope of the volcano. Sunday's eruption of Mount Sakurajima was the 500th this year, which is about 950 kilometers southwest of Tokyo. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Former Japanese Prime Minister Tomiichi Murayama has warned any attempt by the Shinzo Abe administration to revise the country's pacifist constitution could lead to war. Murayama's comments in an interview follow Prime Minister Abe's speech last week, in which he omitted the pledge made by every prime minister since 1994 that Japan would never again go to war. Murayama criticized Abe's actions, marking the 68th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, as a denial of Japan's imperialist past. The Abe cabinet says under international law, Japan has the right of collective self-defense, but Article 9 of the Constitution outlaws war as a means to settle international disputes. Collective self-defense would give Japan the right to counterattack even when its allies come under attack. The United States and Japan have agreed to work together to conclude a regional free trade deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, negotiations by the end of the year. Japanese Trade Minister Toshimitsu Motegi and U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman said Sunday that the two countries reaffirmed their commitment to the goal set by members of the more than three-year-old free trade talks. 12 countries, including the two, Singapore and Australia, will kick off their 19th round of negotiations on the TPP pact later this week in Brunei.
After months of speculation and rumor, China has finally announced disgraced politician Bo Xilai will stand trial this Thursday, charged with bribery, corruption and abuse of power. China's state-run Xinhua news agency says Bo will stand open trial at the Jinan Intermediate People's Court on Thursday morning. The former Communist Party chief of Chongqing was thrown out of the party last year after a scandal surrounding the murder of a British businessman. His wife, Gu Ka-lai, was later found guilty of killing Neil Hayward. The trial carries political implications for the Communist Party amid its attempt to shake off the party's deeply corrupt image. The world's fastest man, Usain Bolt, has joined the ranks of only a handful of sprinters with a record 8 world titles at the World Championships in athletics. Bolt, who already won the gold medal in both the 100-metre and 200-metre men's individual events this year, claimed his third gold in Moscow Sunday in the 4x100-metre relay final as the Jamaican men's sprint team crossed the finish line in 37.36 seconds. With his latest victory, Bolt joins America's Carl Lewis and Allyson Felix, who each have 8 world golds in their career. The 26-year-old also became the first sprinter to achieve a triple at the World Championships for the second time this year. Okay, from tomatoes and throwing tomatoes around, we go to our very lovely weathercaster, Jian, who's going to tell us more about this scorching hot weather we continue to have. Good afternoon, Jian.
Good afternoon, guys. Well...
Yes, well, earlier today and previously, you've been mentioning about Jeju. It's been suffering really quite a terrible drought. It's worst in history, in fact.
Right.
And, you know, it's not good news at all. And, I mean, this heat will eventually cool off, but it's just a matter of time. But the dry soil conditions are threatening the entire harvest there. Of course, there's lots of fruit and vegetables growing down there.
As you mentioned, Jeju is famous for citrus fruits in the Korean market, so it will definitely have a big impact on the local market. And it's concerning to see pictures of tangerines all shriveled up down there.
Right, and even rituals praying for rain have been held a few times already in Jeju, but it looks like for now, rain is not expected until this Saturday on the island. So we're going through a tough summer this year here in Korea, but towards the end of the week, we do expect a little bit of transition. But for today, we'll have another hot and sunny day. Now, tomorrow, there is a chance of outbreaks of rain in eastern parts of the nation, and the rest of the country should have mostly to partly sunny skies with similar daytime highs today, but afternoon highs in Daegu and Seoul is forecast to be same at 33 tomorrow. So if you're in Daegu, you can definitely look forward to tomorrow. Now, this week's weather outlook is looking like this. So central regions will finally get some relief from the tropical night phenomenon as the morning lows will drop to 23 below 25 degrees Celsius, and for the southern provinces, Daegu. Look at temperatures for Daegu. It will drop from 36 to 30 by Sunday. So we're definitely going to have some wetter and cooler conditions that's moving into the nation later on. Now coming back to today's forecast, the most of the morning rain is let up and the sky is clearing up, signaling a much brighter afternoon. So with that, let's take a look at today's numbers. Now the capital and Busan will hike up to 32 and 33 degrees Celsius, and it looks like Daegu and Gwangju will soar to the mid-30s. Now moving over to other places, it looks like Jeju and Daejeon will have another hot and sunny day, and Mount Gyeongbuk will Dokdo should stay a bit cooler in the mid-20s. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me today. Enjoy your lunch break and have a great rest of the day. Now back to you guys in the studio.
Well, thank you ever so much as always, Jiyeon. She does a wonderful job there. And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Thank you for joining us on this Monday here in Seoul, and we'll be back at the same time tomorrow at noon.